Hey guys, this is the MMA breakdown back with my predictions for UFC Fight Night 62, Maia versus LaFlare. We're just coming off of UFC 185. It was last night and I loved it. What a great card. I think it was easily the most entertaining card of the year, highest quality fights. And then we have this card coming up, which is not the worst card ever, but not much to care about or get excited for. Nothing really relevant other than maybe the main event, which by today's main event standards isn't terrible, but still not a great main event. But UFC 185 last night was awesome. Great upsets by Rafael dos Anjos and Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Both of them blew me away, although I gave Dos Anjos a real chance of winning that fight. I thought he'd have a lot of success with the takedowns, but great card. That's what the UFC should be aiming for. Not these kinds of fight nights with a lot of filler, irrelevant guys. But let's get to this card, run through the fights, and try to keep it quick. Starting off with the UFC Fight Pass preliminary card at flyweight. Bentley Syler versus Freddy Serrano. Contestants from tough Latin America. Both guys lost in the first round, although Serrano, a lot of people thought he got robbed and should have won his fight. I thought it was really close, but fought the eventual winner of the show, Alejandro Perez. Was able to get a few takedowns on him. Is an Olympic wrestler from Colombia, so has a good resume there, although I didn't think his takedowns looked world class against Perez. Seems to still be a really green MMA fighter, like all of the guys from tough Latin America were. But I think this one shouldn't be close. I really think Serrano deserves to be the big favorite here. Syler got finished by the eventual finalist, Jose Quinones, and I actually thought he beat Perez in the finale, but still fight wasn't competitive. Syler got finished pretty convincingly. I think it was in the first round. But Serrano's fight was close against the eventual winner and does have that wrestling pedigree. So I'm going to take Serrano here to win a decision. Next up at lightweight, Jorge de Oliveira versus Christos Giagos. I really feel like I shouldn't make a pick here just because I don't have a good sense of either of these guys' abilities, but both of them have already competed in the UFC, and when that's the case, I always make a pick. But Jorge de Oliveira lost to Diago Lima in his debut, got out-wrestled badly, couldn't stop the takedown, and it was pretty much just a takedown fest for Diago Lima. Oliveira really didn't do much at all to resist that. Christos Giagos lost to Gilbert Burns, who's also fighting on this card and seems to be a really strong prospect. Lost by armbar in the first round, I believe. But I think losing to Burns, that isn't as bad as Oliveira getting completely shut out by Diago Lima. So I'm going to take Giagos here, but don't have a good sense of either of these guys at all. But I'm just going to take Giagos. He fought the higher level guy, and Oliveira couldn't do anything against a far less talented guy. Moving on to the Fox Sports 2 preliminary card at lightweight, Leonardo Mafra versus Kane Karazosa. Mafra, contestant from Tough Brazil, won. Fought in the finale against Tiago Perpetuo. Was real close to finishing that fight, but one of those fights where the roles were just completely reversed. Perpetuo was able to turn it around and ended up finishing him, coming back from the brink of defeat. Had, I think, 5 wins outside of the UFC before coming back to fight Rick Story, and I thought he started well, was aggressive, letting his hands go, but Story took him down and submitted him with the arm triangle choke. Kane Karazosa, another guy that I don't have a good sense of, but lost very quickly to Chris Wade in his debut. Wade jumped on a guillotine and pulled guard early in the first round, I think only a minute into the fight, and submitted him. So I'm going to take Moffa here. I think he's a decent fighter. Competed okay with Rick Story early on. Seems to be an aggressive striker, so I'll go with Mafra here. Next up at lightweight, Leandro Silva versus Drew Dober. Leandro Silva submitted Charlie Brenneman in his last fight. Before that, lost a decision to Francisco Trinaldo. And then in his debut, lost to Ildemar Alcantara, but that was about a year and a half ago. And had several fights after the Alcantara fight, between the Alcantara fight and the Trinaldo fight, and I didn't follow any of those fights. But Drew Dober coming off of a win over Jamie Varner, and I can't really give him credit in that win. Varner knocking himself out, going for a suplex, and Dober just taking advantage of that and choking him out. Before that, lost to Nick Hine in a fight that was kind of sloppy, I thought. Didn't look terrible, but in his debut against Sean Spencer, I thought he looked really bad. Thought he looked out of shape, and Spencer was just able to jab him up the entire fight. And Dober just stood there and ate all the shots, really couldn't do anything on the feet, had no answer. So I don't think Dober is really even a mid-level talent, even with the win over Varner. Leandro Silva has shown some... he's athletic, showed some finishing ability against Brenneman. Trinaldo fight, lost the wrestling battle, but I think Silva's going to win here. He's going to be the better wrestler. I don't see... Dober, I don't think, has any one big weapon, really. Just seems to be kind of an average fighter with average to maybe subpar skills everywhere. So I'm going to go with Silva here to win the decision. I think he out-wrestles him and is just the bigger, stronger athlete. Moving on to featherweight, Kevin Souza versus Katsunori Kikuno. Looking forward to seeing Kevin Souza fight again. And I am taking him to win this fight. Had a good finish over Mark Ediva in his last fight. And before that, won a decision in his debut against Felipe Arantes. Not a very dynamic striker at all. Pretty rudimentary, actually, but does have pace. Is really aggressive. But that finishing combination against Ediva is basically just alternating right and left hands. Doesn't really mix up his strikes well. Doesn't throw big combinations, but does have some finishing power. Katsunori Kikuno has wins over Sam Sicilia. Briefly had Tony Ferguson in trouble in their fight before just getting overwhelmed. And his debut had the win over Quinn Mulhern, where he won with the takedowns and top control. Kikuno fights at a pretty slow pace, though. And, Ferguson was able to just overwhelm him. I think Souza's going to be able to do something similar. Pushes a lot harder pace than Kikuno. And Kikuno's traditional martial arts striking, I don't think, is very effective. Gonna go with Souza here. I think he can get a finish on the feet. Moving on to lightweight, Francisco Trinaldo. Last fight on the preliminary card, Francisco Trinaldo versus Akbar Arreola. Francisco Trinaldo, competitor from Tough Brazil, won and has done all right in the UFC. Big, strong guy. Competed at middleweight on the show and somehow has been able to pan out a career at lightweight. Had a real tough fight early on a couple of years ago against Gleison Tebow. Almost finished him with an arm triangle choke. Really likes to get the fight to the ground, but has really decent kickboxing as well. But has had setbacks to Piotr Hallman. Got finished by him, even though he was doing really well early on. Lost to Michael Chiesa. And is there another loss in there? And the Tebow loss early on. But always seems to gas in his fights as the fight goes on. Because he's such a big guy, a former middleweight. But he's getting up there in age 36. I think he's started to slow down a bit in his last couple of fights. Akbar Arreola, I thought he looked terrible against Tiago Trator in his debut. Trator was just lighting him up on the feet, not really hurting him, but just really outpointing him on the feet. And Arreola had no answer. He just looked frozen and completely frustrated and stuck on the feet. But then his last fight against Yves Edwards looked great. Just looked like a freight train running through Yves Edwards. Closed the distance, caught him with a big uppercut, I think, dropped him and finished him off with an armbar, I believe, in the first round. So if he can bring that kind of pace and aggression to Trinaldo, I think it could be really competitive and he could have a chance to win. But I think I'm going to take Trinaldo. He's had a lot more fights in the UFC and, seems fairly talented for the level he's at. So I'm going to take Trinaldo, but just note that he is getting older, seems to be slowing down a bit in his last couple of fights. Arreola has a chance to win, but I'm going to take Trinaldo to win a decision. And moving on to the main card, 6 fights. Starting off with a featherweight fight, Godofredo Castro versus Andre Fili. This is an interesting matchup. Godofredo Castro, another contestant from Tough Brazil 1, was the finalist, lost to Honey Jason. Really wasn't doing well early on in his UFC career. 2-fight losing streak to Felipe Arantes, where he got knocked out, he got finished with elbows, ground and pound, and got knocked out by Sam Cecilia. He's way too comfortable pulling guard and falling on his back. That's how he lost to Honey Jason in the finale. Jason really didn't do much to him, but he was just so comfortable getting on his back and then not doing anything from there that he ended up losing the fight. Against Felipe Arantes, I think he did the same thing, pulled guard. Or no, he got on top, and Arantes just turned him over and pounded him out all in one sequence. And then Sam Cecilia was able to put him on his back and just get the knockout. But then in his last 2 fights, I think he's really turned it around, has really kind of shored up those mental holes. Got a flying knee knockout of Noad Lahat in the first round, and then submitted Deshaun Johnson in his last fight with a triangle armbar. And those guys both are pretty low-level guys, but taking them out both in the first round quickly, I think is showing that he's made some improvements, at least in his mental approach. He's not just pulling guard like he used to, although he did that against Johnson, but was able to make it work and actually get the submission. But Andre Fili, I just think, is the higher level fighter. In his last fight against Felipe Arantes, guy who had a win over Pepe Castro, was able to mix his striking well with his takedowns. Pretty gritty, always hanging in the fight. Before that, fought well against Max Holloway, went to the 3rd round, and the fight was actually pretty even, but ended up getting caught with a guillotine. And then in his debut, looked great against Jeremy Larson. Just really poured it on, finished him. Looked great there. So I think Fili just, with the wrestling, he's going to be able to shut down Castro's submission game. But I think that'll be an interesting battle. And on the feet, I think Fili will have an advantage. Castro's hands are not good. Both guys are good athletes. Castro can make it interesting off his back with the submissions, but like I said, I think Fili's wrestling will be enough to avoid the submission. So I'm going to take Fili to win a decision here. Next up, a lightweight, Gilbert Burns versus Alex Oliveira. Oliveira, newcomer. I'm not going to make a pick here because Oliveira is a newcomer. I don't know anything about him, but Gilbert Burns looks like a really strong prospect. I actually thought he lost his debut against Andreas Stahl, but that fight was so close. Really back and forth fight, and Gilbert Burns still looked really good in that fight. Big combinations. Kind of a big, strong guy. Is built. Really has a muscular build and had good combinations, aggressive striking, and transitioned them really well into his throws and takedowns. That's really the advantage he had over Stahl. And then his last fight against Giagos showed real clean grappling, getting the armbar in the first round. I think he's a strong prospect. Really looking forward to seeing him again. I think he's a relevant fighter. But I won't make a pick here. But I would expect him to have an impressive performance. Next up at women's bantamweight, Amanda Nunes versus Shayna Baszler. Shayna Baszler, losing to Juliana Pena in tough 18. I thought she was competing well actually early on, but eventually Pena was able to take over with the wrestling and went with the guillotine. But then her fight against Betch Correia just looked terrible, really. Correia was just able to walk her down against the fence and throw her combinations and hurt her to the body, finished her. Her game seems to really just kind of rely on pace and kind of forward movement, and that's exactly what Nunes does, but is way better at it, I think. Nunes, two really identical finishes of Sheila Gaff and Germaine de Randamie in her first two fights. Just ran over both of them. Really aggressive, striking early on. Really just goes for that finish. And then her last fight almost beat Kat Zingano. Actually took her to win that fight and was doing great early on. Dropped her and tried to finish her with the ground and pound. Was pretty close to getting the finish. Then Zingano came back, took over, and was able to get on top and pound her out. But I think Nunes isn't going to have any trouble here running over Baszler. I think she can hurt her on the feet, get her down, and just be way more aggressive, beating her to the punch. So I'd expect another violent finish here from Nunes. Next up at lightweight, Leonardo Santos versus Tony Martin. Leonardo Santos, winner of Tough Brazil 2, beat William Macario. And that's the only... I was only impressed with Leonardo Santos in the house when he fought his way through the house and had a competitive fight with Santiago Ponzinibbio. Looks like a really good fighter now. And then filled in for the injured Ponzinibbio to fight Macario. Dropped Macario on the feet, which was really surprising because Macario was a better striker, and finished him off with an arm triangle on the ground. Has a decorated jiu-jitsu background, but in the UFC has not panned out for him since he won the show. His next fight against, was it Norman Park? Yeah, his fight against Norman Park did not look good. Couldn't really deal with Park's strength or forward movement. It was a draw because Park grabbed his shorts, but Park should have won that decision. Santos' striking just looks really stiff and isn't effective at getting the fight to the ground. Then had a win over Efren Escudero in his last fight, but it did not come impressively, and Escudero almost finished him late in the third round, clipped him with a shot, and had him in a lot of trouble. So Santos, I don't think, is really a high-level fighter or even a strong mid-level fighter. Tony Martin, though, has been really impressive. Competed really well with Rashid Magomedov in his debut. Had him in an armbar that looked like it was really close, and had Magomedov in excruciating pain, but ended up losing the fight there. Then lost to Beneil Dariush in his next fight. I thought he was doing well with the boxing early on, but Dariush took him down and submitted him with the arm triangle. And Dariush just coming off of a great win over Koscheck last night. But then his last fight against Fabrizio Camoys looked great. Was able to submit the jiu-jitsu guy, finish him with a Kimura, looked really strong on the ground. And I think Tony Martin is a decent talent to watch. I think he's just going to be bigger and stronger than Santos, even with his decorated jiu-jitsu background. I think Martin is a really good grappler as well, and will have a big strength advantage. And on the feet, I also think his boxing is tighter and more effective. So I'm going to take Martin to win this fight. Next up, a welterweight, Eric Silva versus Josh Koscheck. What the hell is this? Makes no sense to me why the UFC would give Eric Silva Josh Koscheck over Ben Henderson when Ben Henderson offered to step in for this fight. I mean, what happened? I thought these guys had to stay out for 90 days when they got choked out or finished, and a 2-week turnaround for Josh Koscheck, looking terrible in his last fight against Ellenberger. Should have never came back. I mean, he was clearly done after the knockout losses to Lawler and Woodley. And that fight against Ellenberger just looked really bad. I mean, he got one takedown in the fight, and, it looked good. But the way he got choked out, he just looked like Ellenberger made him look like a sick animal. Just like a dog being eaten alive by another bigger, stronger dog. It was really ugly. Just getting finished with a really low percentage submission in such a violent way. I'm giving Koscheck zero chance to win this. I mean, it's going to be a really good fight to build up Eric Silva, make him look great in front of the Brazilian crowd. Eric Silva, is a really talented fighter. They just keep giving him elite guys. He loses to them. Then they give him really low-level guys and put him in the big fights right away again. I think that's, there hasn't been any progression to the level of opponents he's been facing, and he really doesn't get to fight those mid-level guys, which, has really hurt him. I think they've really kind of ruined his career in the UFC that way. But Eric Silva's a really talented fighter. Almost finished Matt Brown in the first round. Has great hand speed. Has big power in his kicks and his punches. He's gonna have a huge speed advantage against Koscheck. And on the ground, he's just really slick with his jiu-jitsu. You saw that in his last fight against Mike Rhodes. Just took him down and with ease choked him unconscious with an arm triangle choke. Just sick, lethal submission game. And very dangerous striking as well. So I think Silva runs over Koscheck. He could knock him out or submit him. I think he'll submit him in the first round with great ease. And the main event, welterweight fight, Damian Maia versus Ryan LaFlare. Like I said, not a great main event, but it is an interesting matchup and a big opportunity for LaFlare. Damian Maia has struggled with wrestlers over his career. The losses to Jake Shields. Although I thought he was going to get out wrestled by Fitch, but had a great win over Fitch. Weidman and Munoz, they were able to win rounds, taking him down. And Maia, there's been a lot of times in his UFC career where he's fought really low-level guys like Mario Miranda, Jorge Santiago, and wasn't able to do much to them at all, wasn't able to come close with his submissions. And I'm certainly not going to say Maia's a bad grappler or not a talented submission guy, but in terms of actually finishing the submission, getting the finish, he's really not that great in that area. I mean, other than the Rick Story submission, his last submission before that was, when was it? Chael Sonnen, 2009 to 2012, with what, like 10 fights in between there, only one submission. I mean, he's really not that great at actually getting the submission. The fight against Rory McDonald, I was very impressed. Was able to take him down, get mount, and almost pounded him out in the first round, but faded badly in the second and third, although was able to get another takedown in the third, and if he could have just secured position, could have still won the fight. But he's getting up there in age. He's close to 40 now. He's 37. Really showed signs of slowing down against McDonald. And another low-level guy he took on his last fight against Yakovlev, was able to drop him, and I think it was the first time Maia ever dropped anyone in his career. But even then, was able to get on top of him for the first two rounds and couldn't come close with any submissions. And Yakovlev was able to hurt him, I think, late in the fight, had a brief little run late. But against a strong wrestler like LaFlare, I think he's going to be able to compete with Maia on the ground. I mean, LaFlare didn't look great against John Howard, wasn't able to hold John Howard down. John Howard was able to reverse him a couple times. On the feet, I think LaFlare looked decent against Court McGee and showed really good scrambling ability in that fight. But his stand-up against Howard didn't look too good. It looked subpar. Howard was able to connect a few times and wobble him. I think the striking will be interesting here. Maia has never really developed his striking into really something he can win the fight with or really threaten anybody with, but it's serviceable, and I think that's about where LaFlare's striking is at, too. I don't think anyone will have a big advantage on the feet. And the ground's just going to be really interesting. Maia's shown great positional grappling against, Fitch, even in the Kim fight that, was really quick. But then against guys like Shields and Munoz and Weidman can't really dominate with that grappling. And LaFlare, I just think, has shown really good scrambling ability. The younger guy, a bit of momentum. This fight could be really close. I don't think Maia even comes close with a submission. And also in the Ponzinibbio fight, LaFlare's wrestling was pretty strong for the first couple of rounds. Had no problem taking him down, but wasn't trouble on the feet late there in the fight. I don't think Maia has the power though to hurt, or volume to hurt LaFlare on the feet. I'm gonna go with LaFlare here. Younger guy, rising prospect. I just think he's able to win a few rounds, winning some of the scrambles, getting on top. But I really think it's going to be a back and forth grappling match, and Maia can definitely win, but it's just getting older, slowing down. I'm going to go with LaFlare to win a decision. Alright guys, so those are my picks for UFC Fight Night 62, Maia versus LaFlare. Thanks a lot for watching. Please like the video, comment, and subscribe. Challenge me on any of my picks. And then after this, 2 weeks after this, we have a card I'm actually really excited for. Fight Night 63, Mendes versus Lamas. A really stacked main card, a lot of relevant fights. Masvidal and Iaquinta. Very excited to see that. And then Mendes versus Lamas. And in April, I think we have about 3 or 4 cards. So I'll be back with predictions for all of those. Keep checking back. I'll try to have my predictions out earlier for this next month, about a week and a half before the fights. So thank you for watching, guys. Really appreciate it. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.